Welcome, Hipstorians, to another episode of All Quiet on the Western Front. Really excited, Neil, about, I think, the 28th of October. We've got the new German production of this absolute classic, which was originally, it was a book written by Erich Maria Remarque, and it then made into a movie. It was Universal Studios' first Oscar winner, and made in 1929. And it's a rip-roaring classic for its day. So we're so I mean, like, we'll talk a little bit about the history behind it and what we might expect when the show is released, and we'll be able to do a review then of the new one and compare it to the old. Obviously the graphics, I'm sure, will be a lot better, but there's some really powerful imagery in this. For 1929, I mean, it's hard to believe it was actually made then. And the war scenes of going over the trenches, over the top, and men fighting and getting blown to bits are really, really quite stark. I don't know. I'll share this one with you, Neil. If there's the guys going in at the barbed wire. There's a picture of two hands holding onto barbed wire after a bomb has blown up the shell has blown up the rest of the body. Really graphic stuff for something that was made in, so soon after the First World War. I mean, we're only talking 10 years, so this would have really been traumatic for veterans, presumably. But the history anyway, it's about a group of young Germans that are recruited. One of them lies about his age. Kammerer is the name of the character, and he's only 16. He goes off to fight on the at the start of the First World War. And I remember we were talking on the Battle of Verdun about the fabric pickelhaubes, like all the leather ones as opposed to the actual hard shells. They went off into war. In this movie, they were wearing these fabric pickelhaubes. I mean, good for absolutely nothing. And so it was really, really accurate. And I don't think you really see too much of that, in World War I movies made today. They were all marching off, singing. Everyone was wonderful. And all of a sudden, they land in the trenches. And I just thought that one of the first things that they experience when they're there is they have no food. They have to go and hunt and find their food. Again, we don't think of these things when we're talking about going to war. Really quite savage stuff. And what did you think? What kind of impression? You saw it many years ago, I think, Neil, and then you kind of, obviously for this, you had a little look at it again. And how did it affect you at all?
I did. I didn't watch it all the way through, to be honest, Eric. I just checked in with it to just have a look, considering, as you said, the much anticipated new remake, which is getting great reviews, by the way. So it sounds like they've done it justice and have honored the spirit of the original. So I did have a bit of a glance at it last night. Obviously it's black and white, and it's not going to have all the bells and whistles from a technology point of view of movie making that the new one will have, but like you said, pretty graphic. Like, it doesn't spare the viewers whatsoever about the grim reality of fighting in the trenches. And like you said, it was like German production, and when it came out, it was banned by the Nazis.
Yeah,
that's how powerful an impact it had. Obviously, now we're talking into the 30s, but it was one of those books that was burned in the famous book burning, that the Nazis initiated because of works that obviously went against their ideology, presumably because of the story and the message that it says. I mean, obviously, with the Nazis just on the curb or on the cusp of yet another war, or at least a few battles ahead of them, that the last thing they wanted out there was this message to young men about just how brutal and futile and the whole thing, the warfare actually is. So yeah, it was marked out by the Nazis and thrown onto a burning pyre. That's how powerful it is.
Yeah, there's a great scene in it when they've gone over the top, and the shells are going off all around them in a graveyard. So it's up, it's churning up, the old dead, while it's consuming fresh bodies. I thought that was really, really powerful. And also then that scene when they're in a a crater with this French soldier that he tries to keep alive, and then wants to kill him, and then the guy dies on him, and he's like completely overwrought with the whole situation, and can't cope, and he's trying to coax him alive, and he's having a conversation with the dead soldier. That's like that's what it was like. I mean, that's what people would have experienced when they were there. Again, I thought that was just amazing. You wouldn't have seen too many movies like that at all. The version I was watching recently had been enhanced in some way to kind of do it justice.
I saw that scene actually that you're talking about, the two soldiers in the shell hole, but do you know where I saw it? And I completely forgot this existed. There's another version of All Quiet, a color one. I seen it when I was a kid. It brought it up. So I was looking at the black and white one, obviously, but while I was Googling All Quiet in the Western Front, this other one came up, and I remember watching it as a kid, and it's in color. And it's actually really good. And it was that scene that I was watching in the shell hole where I presume I just missed the start of it. He must have bayoneted the French soldier, who then kind of bleeds out. And he's the German soldier is kind of giving out to him, saying, "Well, you came in here, to kill me. It was kill or be killed." And then he starts having this remarkable kind of, his humanity comes to the fore, and he starts to apologize. He starts saying, "Sorry." It's really emotive. Like, he starts talking to him, and he takes off the Frenchman's helmet, he rests him, and the Frenchman's all freaked out. He's going, no, I'm trying to make you comfortable. And you see it's just another young man. And this is this is two guys. They could have been sat in a bar in Paris or in Berlin, just having a beer and enjoying each other's company, and instead they're
and he says that in other times we wouldn't have, he'd have been, you would have been my friend. That's it.
I think that's a common thread, isn't it? Down through wars and through conflict is invariably young men facing off against other young men and killing them. And that's, the brutal reality of war. And, there's certain aspects of conflict that we both find interesting and fascinating. But then when it gets down into the nitty gritty, it's really hard to watch sometimes, isn't it? And
See, I think for most people, I think what the movie was trying to say then, the book as well, that like it's easy for the guys with the machine guns almost, or more so the guys who are firing the shells. They're so far back, they don't see who they're killing. Like, this is the thing. But when you're faced with somebody, you're faced with a human life before you, and the decision is entirely yours as to whether you end it or not. That's a very, very different thing. And most soldiers are like, even they're not killed by other soldiers. Typically, it usually is something like a shell or something like that, or something from a long range, unless you're a sniper. And of course, that's a very particular job where exactly. I mean, how lethal you are. But for the most part, it's a difficult thing to do.
And like, you're absolutely right. Modern warfare now has teams of people, soldiers, effectively, in shipping containers in the United States, working a shift like we all do, a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 4, operating drones that are taking out hundreds of people on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
Just at this, literally the flick of a switch. And, it's happening now in Ukraine, presumably, on both sides, where you've the combatants are nowhere near the battlefield. They're nowhere near the front lines. So that's how it's evolved in modern warfare. But you're absolutely right. Like, to face a man face to face and kill him, at your own hands, particularly like during the World Wars, when these guys were like a lot of conscripted armies. They would have been bakers, policemen, teachers, as they were in All Quiet. And then being put into a position where you have to take another person's life. And you're not a killer. Like, you're right. Some people sign up to be snipers. It's a particular skill. Artillerymen do a lot of the damage, again, away from. But to become a killer, because that's what you're being asked to do. It's against all human instinct, isn't it? To take another's life. And I think you start to see that in All Quiet on the Western Front, in all the versions, is that they start, kind of getting each other to just hold on till we make it through this. And you can see it in their faces. Like, at one point in the trailer, the guy says, "I'm afraid about what's to come," because the solace offered by going home has become a cold comfort, because they're going to have to face up to life at home after enduring all of this. And you can almost see them sensing, well, how do we do that after effectively putting our humanity on the line and taking another's life?
No, they couldn't, and they do handle that one as well. When I think Camarera goes back on leave, and he's brought back to talk about the war in front of a class of teenagers, school leaving age, and he's supposed to try and convince them to go off and fight the war, but he can't describe it as anything other than as he found it, much to the shock of the schoolmaster. But that's the thing, and he didn't want it. He didn't know how to adjust to life. He wished he hadn't come back, that he just stayed out on the front. And it's and then again, the other side of what happens, and it's covered in the movie, is I suppose fraternization with the local gals. There's a scene where they go and they kind of dress up in kind of dresses. I don't know what that's about, but they end up having their wicked way with the three French ladies, and no problem, because they were getting on with their life as well. I mean, that's the other part of World War One, that we imagine it's this total war like you would in World War Two. It's not. There's lines 500 miles of trench, all right, but like outside of the front and behind the lines, life goes on. It was over. If you weren't fighting in the front, nothing happened. You had food shortages and things like that. But it's a weird war like that. That mechanized hell along a small area, really.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles in length, but you're absolutely right, not so much in depth. Like it changed so relatively little over the course of 4 years that just a matter of a few miles behind the front line, as you said, life probably just carried on. Like you could hear the thud presumably in the distant background, and that's all the war would have been to many people, was a distant thud, apart from the privations of food supplies and whatnot. But you're absolutely, it was a bizarre way of conducting modern industrial warfare, which obviously in the Second World War was a bit more fluid, and then take us into the modern age. It would have affected civilians a hell of a lot more, with carpet bombing and area bombing, and all the various nasty little colonial wars around the planet. Whereas in the First World War, it was literally just armies just facing off against each other for years in brutal slog. It is interesting though, like we had in recent years a great, from historians and amateur historians' point of view, revisitation of history, particularly in the Second World War. Some great movies, that obviously one that jumps to mind, Saving Private Ryan, which brought a whole new audience to the European theater, and the massive operation that was D-Day. It brought it. I remember seeing it in the cinema at the time in the States, and I was just blown away by that. And people were leaving the cinema through that.
It was hard. Yeah, I remember that as well. I was there. I was on the beach.
It was brilliant. It was brilliantly done. And now what we're starting to see is revisiting to perhaps movie makers are starting to now look at the First World War, because we had Sam Mendes' movie 1917, which is as well, another pretty damn good movie. Did a great job in terms of storyline. I think it went off the tangent a little bit. Like I didn't see that whole point where they go off on this. Doesn't he float down a river at some stage? It's kind of like a bit odd and bizarre. But like, look at the authenticity and the attention to detail put into these movies, which is what we've seen in the new Second World War movies as well. I mean, look, some of them are classics. I love going back and seeing them, particularly around Christmas time. But they get your goat. One of the worst offenders has to be the Battle of the Bulge.
Right, yeah.
Awful. Like I think it's 1970s. Oh my gosh, it's just so wrong. Like they're using American Patton tanks that were out in the 60s and the 70s as German. Right? It's really hard to watch, because they just didn't care, about attention to detail. Whereas then, in fairness, like Spielberg and Tom Hanks, people like that, I just watched a little bit of Band of Brothers again there recently. Like these guys sit down, they study, they really, attention to detail is paramount with these guys. And that's for people like you and me, and presumably a whole range of our listeners, our viewers there will will appreciate that. I think now that's what they're doing with these First World War movies, is that, again, that attention to detail. You see in 1917, they're wearing the leather jerkins, the British infantrymen would have worn at the time, their cap badges and everything. So that's why, I have high hopes, I think, for this weekend, and the all quiet in the Western Front. I think it's really going to be a treat. I think it's going to be, it's going to be a tour de force, and I think it will sit well with its predecessors.
Yeah.
And the all important book that you mentioned that it's based on. So yeah, definitely looking forward to this one.
Yeah, cool. So we'll come back and we'll have a chat about that next week, once we've had a chance to watch it and enjoy it. So yeah, listen, thanks for dropping in. This is slightly different to what we've just been doing, obviously, with the on the recording it on Zoom, as opposed to being out in the field. But we'll try and get out in the field when the rain flipping stops here in Ireland. It's been a wet October, but
listen, in the meantime, guys, you're aware that our podcast is up and running. We've got some really great, an eclectic collection of guests so far that we're only up a month, and we've had everybody from an Indiana Jones-like archaeologist to a former Navy US SEAL. Then we'll be talking to a prize-winning author about her book she's written while a journalist in Baghdad. That's Margaret Coker. That's coming up soon. We have Dan Golden, who's written a book about the battles in ransomware in the modern world. So it's really taken off, hasn't it, Terry? And thanks to everybody, for the views.
For listening in, yeah,
it really is great. And
we have a very good series in Ireland within all this as well. And we're talking to some people that were part of the IRA. We've got people who lived through the troubles of the teenagers and their diary that was written about it. And we're talking to some heavyweights about the actual I suppose the likes of the Civil War and the treaty, and getting right into it. But we're going to do Ireland 1922 to 2022. So it'll be a few different parts of that.
Keep listening, keep watching, and thanks for all your support, everybody. Much appreciated.
Take care.
Thanks for the Hipstorians.
Yeah, bye now.
Bye, Derek.